Welcome back. Last week, we reported that the Prime Minister had just announced a 28 trillion yen stimulus package, and that was just announced as we were going on air. We've had a week to think about that, to look at the details on that. Michael, this is something that's really gotten your goose going.
Well, I'm beyond salvation, I'm afraid. I cannot possibly say one nice thing about this. It is basically, for me, it's either pandering to the ignorant or insulting everybody. I don't know which of those two it is.
Why is it 28 trillion? Why isn't it like 48 trillion? I mean, bigger is better, isn't it?
Okay, even Shinzo Abe has limits on the amount of...
A grasp of reality.
He has to, there's just simply a limit to the amount of BS that he can put out. 28 trillion is nowhere near the actual amount of new spending that's going to be done. That's probably around 7 to 8 trillion of that is going to be what is called mamimza, fresh water. And then that's a lot of money, and it would make a real difference if we were certain that it was going to be spent properly. But there's absolutely no guarantee of that in anything that's been announced so far.
Doesn't he have a bit of a history of overpromising and underperforming? I mean, this has happened to us before.
Well, in the case of Abenomics, if you mean in general, none of the goals of Abenomics, as were described to us when he laid it out in 2012 to 2013, none of those have been met. Now, one can talk about auxiliary and external factors that have in some way prevented that from happening. Fine, great. But it would be nice at least one of the goals was met. Something to grasp onto. We have nothing. Now we have a new plan, and it is a plan that, for me, okay, I understand stimulus packages. I understand that they're necessary. I understand that you have to do them, especially if there's some kind of major crisis. But there's a difference here. There's a difference between having a real global crisis. And remember, at the G7 summit, he was passing around this graph of commodities prices saying, look, according to commodities prices, we're about to have a global crisis on the scale of the Lehman shock. Everybody get on board with me. And they all looked at him, no, we can't.
And look what happened. He did kind of call it.
He did kind of call it, but it turned out to be Brexit and the slowdown in China. Well, you know, as long as the answer is correct, doesn't matter how you got there. Wrong. Okay. First, I don't believe that's true. Because, you know, how you get to the answer to a problem really will decide how you solve it. And in this case, this is a pure, let's fill in the hole that was caused by or is going to be caused by the decline in production. Let's just make new spending to tide things over. That's fine. Okay, I understand the Keynesian argument there. However, the projects that they're investing in have so little payoff. The spin-off effects, what you get in terms of long-term increases in productivity are nil if they're not negative. And at that point, I have to say, I'm sorry, I have to get off this bus.
Where does all of this money come from? I mean, the 28 trillion that he's announced, it's probably spread out over a three-year period. Probably less than 1/3 of that is earmarked for the next fiscal period, for the fiscal period that we're in right now.
And it's not in any way, they've tried to massage the sources of income. Mostly it seems to be coming from the Fiscal Investment and Loan Program, the FILP as it's called, which is people's savings that have been cycled through the post office. No, you know, we had a revolution in 2005. We kicked out the postal rebels from the LDP. Koizumi soared to great victory. We're going to get ourselves off of this IV that we've been stuck on for all this time.
Tremendous what he achieved.
And no, we're going to use that thing as the last piggy bank. We can't get any money from taxes. We cannot do it anymore with bonds. We're going to hit the FILP. And that, for me, again, it says we're out of ideas. We don't know where to go. We're going to cash in the family silver and walk away.
The timing of his announcement is also very curious. Why did he announce it then? And he had an extraordinary diet session just so that the cabinet could approve this budget suggestion, which they did.
Well, the thing is, the cabinet meeting that approved it, okay, yeah, it has to be there. during a diet session. But the diet session itself is merely to seat the House of Councilors that was elected in the last election.
3 days, 4 days?
Yeah, it doesn't normally do anything this session. They just simply say, hello, this is the House of Councilors. We have our seats filled, because the House of Councilors is the continuing body in the government. The House of Reps can be dissolved, and there can be interims when there is no House of Representatives. But the House of Councilors has to be seated at all times. It's the permanent institution in the legislative branch. And so they had to have the session immediately after the election. They did so, but we have a concatenation of events. We had the Tokyo elections. We've had the opening of the Diet. We've had a cabinet reshuffle.
Right.
All of these have buried this plan, which should otherwise be looked at very carefully and very critically. And it's not getting that look from either domestically or externally.
So what are the big ticket items in this $28 trillion that people are going to be able to see within the next foreseeable 2-year period?
Well, they're going to try to put the package together that pays for this new 3 arrows that they've talked about, of one, having nobody leave the workforce to take care of an elderly relative.
Dynamically engaged.
The dynamically engaged, the issues in terms of childcare, all of this, they're going to be able to pay for that, they say, and that's going to be resolved. It's not going to be resolved. It's a chronic problem, and it's a problem in terms of social spending. The more you spend on this, the more people apply for it.
Sure. Right.
It's a social spending issue. The more you spend on it, the more people apply for it.
It becomes attractive.
They call it out of the woodwork in social sciences, because as long as there are childcare spaces available, they will be filled.
Right.
Until there is an oversupply. There's no way of finessing it.
Right. There's some free money involved.
There's maybe some free money involved.
A little bit to
but also there's going to be things like they're going to try to pass, probably in the extraordinary session in the fall, regulations that allow what are now unregulated daycare centers to be considered regulated. In other words, lowering standards in order to make it seem as though a problem goes away. They'll do all kinds of funny things like that and say, okay, the money was well spent, bingo. Though that's part of what's going on. And whether that indeed here's the thing. Yes, you can fulfill the targets through various fiddles and things, but will it help growth?
Sure.
That's the issue.
You're looking for a multiplier.
I'm looking for a multiplier here, and I don't see it.
You don't see it in the maglev.
I definitely don't see it in the maglev. The maglev is a hole in the ground in which you pour money and never see it again.
Right.
The entire program for me is pouring water on sand. And once you've poured it all out, you'll suddenly say, why did I do that? And, well, it'll be too late.
The Diet will now go into session in September, and the House of Councilors will review this budget. They'll pass it up to the upper house, and then it will become law.
There'll be a supplemental budget this fall, and there will be all kinds of different items, all very attractive, all also to detract attention from the moves that seem to be made, that are going to be made in regards to constitutional revision, or maybe the two will be confusing each other so that we won't pay attention sufficiently to both. Oh, no,
I think that's exactly the case. I mean, look at us. Look at what we're talking about when there are other issues we could be focused on, but we're talking about this 28 trillion yen budget.
But the thing is, not enough people are. And it's symptomatic to me, particularly this giveaway to the maglev of a complete changeover since the victory and the House of Councilors election. It's at least this budget, and we'll talk about later in terms, so maybe we'll have a chance to talk about the cabinet reshuffle. Abe Shinzo is paying off his cronies.
Sounds a little bit like the LDP of old?
Not the LDP of old, because at least in the LDP of old, there were at least 1 or 2 or 3 other factions that could vie for the prime ministership.
Right.
Abe Shinzo and his Seiwa Kai are running.
Oh boy, they really took the lion's share.
They are running rampant, and anybody who is associated with Abe, whether on the political side or on the economic side, is going to be served, and everybody else gets bupkis.
Let's focus on that in some other segments. Please stay tuned. 28 trillion yen budget that was passed just a couple of days ago. Big ticket items. Stay tuned.